Hello, Justin Otero here to talk about my triangulated analysis presentation for Read 536. The program that I'm going to discuss today is called Amplify ELA. It's a blended learning program, so it's located mostly online, and it's the curriculum that's being adopted by my district. Currently, we are piloting it, and it will become the core curriculum for grades 6 through 8 starting next year. I focused on a specific unit, specifically subunit 2, the Space Race Collection. So this is a research-based unit meant for 8th grade students, and it really focuses on information literacy. So that means to me that the unit is focused on not only having students practice literacy skills, but practice skills that are authentic in the fact that they have to search for information in an online setting in order to get the information they need. So that includes research itself in the form of different online scavenger hunt activities. It asks them to distinguish between reliable, unreliable sources. And all of these activities really focus on close reading, not only the traditional close reading with a given text, but close reading with digital online platforms and also visual analysis. So that means looking at pictures and comparing them with readings and kind of synthesizing information in a really kind of authentic way, how you would use technology kind of day to day as an expert in the discipline. I included this slide because I think it's a good visual representation of some of the resources that students and instructors alike will be running into as they use this program. I think it's really eye-catching, and the visuals that are provided really make it easy for students to navigate and even to access information. I think in other online curriculums that I've seen, the authors or the creators of that curriculum don't do as good a job as Amplify ELA. So I think that's a real strength. And I will mention it going forward. When we talk about theory, there's 4 different theoretical frameworks that I think are clearly present when we analyze this program. Firstly, and primarily, I think we need to talk about metacognitive theory. And I think it's a strength with this program because every step of the way throughout the lesson and throughout this subunit specifically, students are asked to discuss in a way that promotes collaboration, interpretation, and reflection, specifically focused on their own thinking. So they're allowed the time to reflect on what they're learning, how they're learning it, and why they're learning it. This leads to metacognition, obviously, but it also helps them in the comprehension process. Secondly, we can talk about the constructivist lens, the transactional or reader response theory. Primarily in looking at the structure of individual lessons, I recognize the aspects of constructivist lenses. In particular, the instructional routine of Amplify ELA seems to be linked to this theory. And basically, that theory says that all readers have individualized reading experiences because each reader has unique background schemata. So I think this program allows students to access that background knowledge, or at least it makes an attempt by providing a variety of text. So it allows readers to not only discuss, but it also allows readers to kind of research and find something that they can connect with on an individual level. I also can connect this program to behaviorism, or specifically direct instruction. Each unit, subunit, and lesson has discrete skills and strategies that are taught within a specific area of ELA instruction, and that can be readily seen in every lesson. For example, in the research lesson, we are learning specific research skills, how to read through a research text, how to figure out if it's reliable or unreliable, and how to use the different parts of an online text, such as the visuals, to kind of navigate. Lastly, we can talk about affective lenses or engagement theory. Engagement theory talks about how emotions play a large role in student success and engagement, saying that engaged readers are those who are intrinsically motivated. Again, I think just the way that the program is set up online is very engaging for students. It's something that is familiar to them. And if you add in the piece where they are constantly asked to discuss and collaborate and interact, that it makes this blended learning model much more palatable especially for a middle school audience. So when we talk about best practices, I'm going to talk about an activity and link it to a quotation from Gramble and Morrow. So firstly, I want to talk about the scavenger hunt, which is a central activity of the subunit. Really, it entails taking a bunch of different texts about the space race from many different perspectives, or I would say mainly two different perspectives. And it allows students to navigate those texts. And in Gramble and Morrow, they talk about how a best practice is having students engage with texts that are appropriately leveled for them. And I think the scavenger hunt does that well, because not only are they able to choose the texts that speak to them, but they're also appropriately leveled. They're actually edited in a way that archaic language and really, really specialized language that might trip up students are easily accessible to most of the students in the classroom. The second activity I want to talk about is the dialectic discussion, or it's called a dialogic discussion by Gramble and Morrow. So basically, this is a best practice linked with the idea that teachers should serve as facilitators of discussion and eventually should step back fully to have students engage with these meaningful discussions independently or with peers. I think the program does this well because it allows, throughout a given lesson, students time to discuss and maybe take a step back from those discrete skills or those specific strategies that they're learning and really reflect on what they're learning. So it's kind of an internal dialectic discussion happening within a student, while there's also this peer-to-peer discussion happening as well, which is linked with greater comprehension of the content and more learning or more growth for individual students. There's also a close reading strategy or a close reading activity comparing text to images. And I think this stood out to me because you don't see this very often. And I think it's linked to the idea that this is really an information literacy unit. And they do learn specific comprehension strategies and processes, which are important for understanding content, but they understand it in a way where close reading is the focus, but it's still fresh for the students. It's not something that drags on. It's actually something that creates that engagement. Lastly, I want to talk about authentic research. So the goal of the unit is to lead students into authentic research and navigation of online resources. A best practice mentioned in Gramble and Morrow is that students are intrinsically motivated by authentic texts read for authentic reasons or purposes. So I think this unit does that really well, and it's a good progression of activities that has this research at the end. It's done mostly independently, but still there are opportunities to have students share and discuss with peers. So now I want to talk about culturally responsive education, specifically in regards to a Euro-American centric history and values, because I think when we talk about the space race, so the content that is used in this subunit, I think there is a very narrow perspective when we're talking about what's being presented to students. I think there's a clear need for a more diverse set of perspectives presented in the curriculum. I don't think there are many like multi-ethnic frames of reference in the unit itself. And I think the only examples that we do get are an example of tokenism, because there is one, I actually looked through all the texts, and there is one text about an African American female mathematician. And other than that, most of the texts are from a predominantly white male perspective, either from the United States or the Soviet Union. So I think there are more perspectives out there that could allow students to really see themselves in the content, which is important when thinking about the student populations that we're seeing in the classroom that are very diverse and do not necessarily reflect this very Eurocentric point of view. So when we're synthesizing this information, I can see a clear emphasis on collaborative discussion. There are theoretical connections that are linked with equitable practices. However, those collaborative discussions and that theoretical connection to best practices doesn't always represent the students that are in the classroom and the knowledge bases that they bring. That being said, although the organization of material is theoretically sound, for example, it uses direct instruction and gradual release very consistently, that consistency doesn't really connect to this promotion of intrinsic motivation. A lot of the time it's too consistent, too staunchly connected to a cyclical process that repeats over and over. That being said, there are certain strengths, and I think the organization itself is a strength, and the consistency is a strength. The platform is really easy to use, and it's easy to teach. However, the narrow focus paired with that organization and that staunch consistency creates a lack of cultural responsiveness. So I think my recommendation would be to allow for multiple perspectives on provided subject matter, and that subject matter can still be organized and still be staunchly consistent. However, there needs to be more access points for students of diverse backgrounds, connecting background knowledge to the content and curriculum. So I think if you make those two changes, overall it will strengthen and bolster a curriculum that's already very strong.